video is sponsored by Alpha Draft, where you can play fantasy esports such as Counter-Strike Global Offensive. More recently, I was playing the Major there, made some teams. Some people let me down, some people did awesome. Flasher I had on my team. This is Thorin versus Reddit, and it's episode 2, but this one's going to be entirely about Counter-Strike Global Offensive, CSGO. And so as a result, I've got a different overlay here. I had lots of people send me in some really good overlays. So I picked out 2 of the best ones, and I'm going to use those. One I'm going to use a totally different one for the League of Legends one, and one I'm going to use for CSGO, because they were both so good. I wanted to kind of use them in some way. It seemed like a waste to throw one of them away. So anyone who doesn't know the basic concept, I've been collecting Reddit posts that are like funny or just interesting or thought-provoking or infuriatingly idiotic, and now I'm going to go through them and kind of respond to them, react to them, give you my thoughts. So I've got a whole bunch in a file here, and we'll just see what we got here. So here we go. When ESL announced their 250k Dubai tournament in CSGO, there was a comment, and at the time it had 33 points, so upvoted, and it said basically someone was asking about Asians playing Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I think it was about Koreans, maybe. I think it was Koreans, but Asians in general, because obviously in China, in Korea, CSGO is not a big game, but in any stretch of the imagination. So a guy with a very upvoted comment said, "God forbid they spend $15 on CSGO and go broke." And then a guy who responded, and so I'll read the response first actually, he had much less points, 9 points. He said, "But it isn't even about the money. It is about accessibility. And if you were a 14-year-old going into a LAN center without any previous knowledge, would you play the game that is free on the desktop, or would you download a program called Steam and pay $15 for a game that isn't popular in your country? Sounds kind of obvious, right?" Now this guy has nailed it there, but I can go into more depth. So the original comment, like, God forbid they spend $15 on CSGO and go broke. Well, first of all, for some of the people you're talking about here, certainly some people in China, spending $15 on a game would be sort of like going broke. For them, that $15 is like you spending $150. So for a game you've never played before, never heard of, you somehow discover it even vaguely, and there's games where before you've gotten to know CSGO, other FPS games, Crossfire, Sudden Attack, whatever it might be, until you know the nuances of the game and the pro level, they're going to look like the same game, except this one's already on the machine. It's free. It's right there on the desktop. You click on it. So it's ridiculous to actually take his perspective as reasonable. Like, no one would spend the $150 on the game they've never played and that no one else in the LAN cafe is playing. The whole reason why CSGO isn't popular in Asia, and likely probably never will be in China or Korea, actually comes down to specifically what this guy was referencing in his reply to this, which is a very reasonable kind of analysis, not of the game. You're not looking at the features of the game and all the rest of it. You're looking at the socio-economic, cultural, environmental aspects of why someone would or wouldn't choose the game. Before I go into his aspect there, all you need to really know is that barely anyone plays CSGO in China. Barely anyone plays CSGO in Korea. Yet there are 2 games in each of these countries that are very popular and make hundreds of millions of dollars in profit from the revenue of the in-game stuff you can buy, etc., etc. And they're both free to play. So in China, the game that I'm thinking of is Counter-Strike Online. Now, Counter-Strike Online is CS 1.6, the same game. You can go and look at the videos, it's the same, but modded to be an online game that's free to play, and you can somehow purchase things within the game. Now, Crossfire, the one that's a Korean-made game, is also reasonably popular, much more popular than CSGO there, but it's reasonably popular as a game. You go into LAN cafes, sometimes you'll see people playing it. Majority of the people in the LAN cafes, admittedly, are playing League of Legends. If they're not playing League of Legends, a few people play Brood War, and then otherwise it's like MMOs and like Diablo type stuff, like Korean versions of them. First thing to note is that in these countries, people in general are actually tending to play games made by their countries. So there's actually tons and tons in Korea of like Korean-made games, such as Crossfire, like any sort of online game you can think of. Korea will have its own versions of it made by Korean companies that are sort of clones or like rip-offs, etc. Then they play League of Legends, because League of Legends is free and it's a very successful marketing campaign. It's just got everything you would want if you're an Asian in terms of it's in the LAN cafe, everyone's playing, it's free, you get all the champions unlocked. So once you understand these economical components, it's ridiculous to even imagine the CSGO person could play. It's not about the game. You can think CSGO is a brilliant game, and you could accurately say Crossfire is not a very good game. But how would they ever find out about CSGO? They wouldn't. They don't read HLTV.org, mate. They don't even know CSGO exists competitively. They live in their world where they come to the LAN cafe, they play. And also the reason why the $15 for CSGO is very big is because one of the ways... Here's something for some people who don't know. One of the ways that Starcraft Brood War became a huge game in South Korea, where they sold millions of copies, and basically it sold almost something like as many copies in South Korea as it did in like the rest of the world, even though it was quite a popular single-player game in the West in like the late 90s, early 2000s. The reason why is because, first of all, there was this socio-economic component where Korea had banned like Japanese consoles. So whereas most of us in the West were playing consoles, they weren't in Korea. They didn't have consoles. They were banned basically. So no one was playing Nintendo, Sega, etc. That wasn't happening. PlayStation. Then there was like a recession, an economic downturn. I don't know if it's specifically a recession, but an economic downturn. And so people didn't have a lot of money, a lot of spare income. So one of the ways to have something to do was you didn't have to buy a PC. In the West, to be a Counter-Strike player, you basically in general had to have bought a PC. So your dad had to have a PC, or you had to be able to get a PC. PCs used to cost like $1,000 or more. That's not, a little kid can't buy that. So as a result, people used to go out and play cheap games at the LAN cafe. You'd pay like, say, roughly $1 an hour. You could play any games on the machine. It's got all the games, free to play games, preloaded on the machine, or it had Brood War and the other games built into the machine. And so as a result, people are doing that. Then lastly, and here's a very interesting component people don't understand, because this is one that took me a while to really get to know by talking to Korean people and studying the culture, which is that because there's such a heavy emphasis placed on school, that actually is why people are such big gamers in South Korea, believe it or not, and I assume in China, which is that in Korea, it's so important. Your parents hassle you all the time about your grades. They want you to get A's and everything, that as a result, even if you had a PC at home, they're not going to let you just sit in the front room playing some computer game for 5 hours. They're going to be like, do your homework, do this, do this. So instead, what people would do, and most of them didn't own a PC like that anyway, or if they did, their dad would own it, is they would say, right, Mama, I'll go out to the library and study. And she'd be like, great, awesome. And they'd be like, can I have a bit of money for like snacks and stuff? So she'd be like, okay. She'd give them like the equivalent of $5. Right, boom, there we go. There's 5 hours at the LAN cafe. Or there's 4 hours and then a snack, a drink or something, you know. And that's actually believe it or not, the emphasis on not playing games and on being really studious and diligent is actually indirectly what caused this kind of like outbreak of hardcore gaming and people going so hard into gaming. It's a way to procrastinate and to get away from your parents, etc. So you can see with all these components, CSGO isn't even in the conversation to be a big Asian game, etc. And so I think that's just an absolutely ludicrous way to phrase it there, because what this person's done there is it's like a fish who doesn't understand that he's in water somehow communicating with a creature, say a human, who doesn't live in water, and being like, well, why don't you just swim through the air and just go up to the top of a tree and get something? It's like, well, what do you mean? You can't do that in air. You're in water, mate. That's why you can do that. It's different. The physics is totally different, you know that. And they don't understand they're in water, so they can't get it. So what's perfect about this guy's comment and then the reply, which is very reasonable and quite shrewd and studious, like the guy's obviously studied the situation. What's great about the original comment, though, that I thought I'd highlight, is that basically this is an example of someone who can't get out of his own head and see beyond his own perspective. Like, he's taken for granted tons and tons of things. Like, he lives in the West, he's played computer games, buying computer games is a default, buying computer games at more money, $50, $60 is a default, therefore buying a $15 game is actually cheap, whereas in Korea that's incredibly expensive. People have PCs at home, therefore you're going to have PCs, you're going to have games, maybe you can even get your parents to buy a game for you if you're a kid. You know about CS because CS has existed in the West for over a decade, been played. Everyone's played Counter-Strike at some point in time. You know about the genre of FPS. It's one of the most popular in the West even to this day. In Asia, never been particularly popular in general. Warcraft 3, Dota were even always bigger than Counter-Strike 1.6. So you can see it's a perfect example of how when you look at these situations, not only do you have to study the other culture, but you have to study your own. It's like there's a great saying that I always think of whenever people ask me about like why I've traveled so much, but friends of mine from home, which is there's this great quote that goes something along the lines of, what do they know of England? Those who only England know. And the idea is, if you've only ever lived in England your whole life, you might think you're an expert about England, but actually you will know less than someone who'd lived in England, but then gone to other places that aren't England, because by going to places that aren't England and learning about them and what makes them different, you will then come back and understand why certain things are a certain way in your country, how things are different, and maybe even some of the things that you like better about that particular country. So anyway, it's just a general point. Whenever you're addressing these sorts of topics, you got to be very careful about how you do it. It's not as simple as like, you're the smartest and you know everything and everyone else is an idiot. Like, that's pretty ridiculous. I mean, you got to get to my level before you can pull that off, boys, you know. So there was a post where it said, so I guess I no longer need a diffuser. I have the code, or something like that. And basically a guy posted a picture where he's had tattooed onto his body the code from the bomb in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Now, all I thought of when I saw this, was I remember an anecdote that a fan told on some forum years and years ago, where there was a thread about the band Tool. And if you know the band Tool, very good band, progressive rock metal band, really awesome tunes, interesting artistic perspective, some very talented musicians. But one of the downsides of that band, much as bands like Radiohead, I mean, there's a bunch that are really obvious ones, as much because they're slightly underground, not, I guess in Radiohead's case, not anymore, because there's, and I guess in these ones really not so much actually, because originally they weren't totally mainstream and then they became very big anyway. There's a large amount of people who follow these bands who are just cretins, and like, they obviously do enjoy something about it that we're all enjoying. There is some universality to what they're enjoying about the musician, etc. But then they're the sorts of people who think every song by them they're the best, that they're the best band ever, every member's the best member of his position ever in every instrument, and everything they do is wonderful, and even every B-side's amazing. And they really are, it fits the name, they are just tools. They're just fucking complete cretins. And even if you like the band, you'd be around these people and you'd be like, ugh. It'd be embarrassing for you, even if you liked the band. Just the fawning nature of them. So anyway, I read an anecdote in this thread where someone explained how they'd been backstage at some Tool concert, and Danny Carey, the drummer, very good drummer, and the guitarist who writes a lot of the songs, they were talking to some fan who came up to them, and the fan like pulled up his sleeve and he had like a Tool tattoo or something like that, or something pretty hardcore, like a tattoo with the band or something, you know. And the lead singer, Maynard James Keenan, who is a bit of a dick sometimes. He's a very abrasive personality and doesn't particularly like fans, etc. Basically walked over as the guy was showing his tattoo to the other two members. And the other two were like, kind of like, oh, cool, oh, that's awesome, man. Let's, really appreciate the support. Like, oh, I love seeing fans. And basically, he just walked over, pointed at this tattoo, and just said, forever, and just walked away. Now, that basically sums up my feeling about this guy getting the fucking bomb code from CSGO tattooed on his arm. Now, listen, I've no doubt maybe he had some wonderful times playing this game. Maybe he wants to remember them. Maybe he really identifies with CSGO and he feels like this is his home and a great game. First of all, it's not even the best FPS game. It's not even the best Counter-Strike game, mate. Secondly, in like 5 years, you might not even be playing that game anymore. You might not even give a fuck about it anymore. And you can explain this story for, 10 years, 20 years to everyone who sees that fucking code. Which, by the way, also, if we're going to talk about just general history of people putting code, like numbers on their body, that kind of like an allusion to the Holocaust. I'm not saying you're doing that, but I would have that association in my mind, at least if I saw it. So I'd wonder about it. So listen, you're welcome to do that. But again, I just wonder about things like that. Because again, have you really thought through that that's going to be there forever? Forever? I certainly wouldn't be as bold. So there was a thread where someone, and this got reasonably high, where someone said, there is Adren and Adren facepalm. And then a bunch of people in this thread explained that they didn't know that there were two different Adrens in CSGO. So there's Adren, usually lowercase a, capital N, who played for iBuyPower, won an ESEA title with them, who played with Denial, and now with, the team became Team Liquid now. And he's the in-game leader, and he's an AWPer. And then there's the other Adren, often capitalized A, sometimes a 3 instead of an E, but that one is from Kazakhstan, old school 1.6 player. The other Adren was a Source player. Old school 1.6 player, used to be a very skilled individual player in 1.6. In CSGO, more of a supportive player, more of like a hybrid supportive player, and has played his whole career for like Virtus Pro, now Hellraisers, these sorts of teams, okay. So here's a great quote that kind of summed up the people who get it confused, okay. It said, I have more than 1,000 hours in-game, actively watching pro matches and following the changes in the scene, I always felt something weird about Adren, but never realised what it is. There is 2 of them, guys. I found this out alone this week, and I felt myself extremely stupid. Please, if there are anybody who didn't know this, please tell me, because I just cannot be the only one. And apparently he wasn't. There's another guy who said, I didn't know it. Now, guys, my mind's just fucking blown. I mean, I actually, I can relate to this because there's there was a guy, there was a movie, called Arthur. And it was about like this ancient like Roman times where this guy came along and he was joining the native peoples of England. And then there's a guy called Arthur who lives down my road. I'm getting confused already. Then there's Arthur, the legendary king of yore, the once and future king of England. And then actually, this is just, I can't even handle this. There's actually Arthur, sort of the bear god of the sort of pagan Celtic type people, from thousands of years ago. I mean, I'm confused even as I'm describing that, because wait a minute, yeah, this Arthur. How can this be? How can there be so many people called Arthur? It's actually not really confusing at all, is it? Because even in saying that, I gave you all the context that you needed to know that they're quite explicitly different people and different context and different times and different places in the world. And there'd be no way you could ever confuse them beyond the fact the names are the same or similar. Now, the reason why it's kind of ridiculous that this guy could really have watched thousands of hours in game, tons of pro matches, and still not be aware, not be aware, but kind of be like, something a little bit fishy going on here, is because these 2 guys don't even play on the same continent. One's from America, the other one's from Kazakhstan. One plays with Russians, the one from Kazakhstan, unsurprisingly. The other one plays with Americans. They even play with different teams. They don't look at all alike. And they don't even spell their names the same way. There's different capitalization. Sometimes numbers are different. So really, I don't even understand on the basis that their names are the same how you could think they're the same, because they're never in the same team. They're never playing the same sort of opponents in general. They play a totally different playing style. They don't look the same, and their names usually are spelled differently. What other clues did you need, guys? Did one of them need to literally call himself Adren? No, not that Adren, not the other one that is Kazakhstan. Like, come on, man. And this wasn't such a difficult code to crack. Although if you need a code, I know a guy who's got it on hand all the time. Anyway, let's keep going. So, okay, 29 points. This was in a thread that was about the talent lineup for IEM Gamescom, and it said 29 points. Natu should be at Nip's mansion coaching his goddamn team. Jesus fucking Christ. It's like they almost refuse to get their shit together. Now, first of all, this is just a beautiful fan comment, because the fan comment always puts them in a position where they're just the genius who knows every factor, every single piece of context, and then they just go super fucking ham on the team, etc. As though they're real idiots, they don't know anything. Now, this is just classic fan logic as well. This is a great piece of fan logic that has always been utterly idiotic, but fans will use this line of reasoning often, especially to players and in forums and on tweets, which goes like this. When a player does anything they don't like, says anything they don't like, does anything extracurricular to playing, the fan will say, like, that player should be practicing instead of tweeting or playing or doing whatever I want or going to a fan thing, as though, like, that made sense, okay? As though, like, because he's not the best at the moment or he's not winning, he should be practicing instead of doing that. As though practice is the answer here, okay? Now, first and foremost, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You know that old saying? Natu could be in Nip's mansion all day, telling them about strats, telling about the rest of it. Doesn't mean they'll do it. Doesn't mean they'll do it. And as a result, they'll improve. Therefore, that really has no bearing on whether he then goes and does a tournament as well. He could be doing the best job in the world and go and do this tournament. Because, by the way, Nip isn't even playing at that tournament. So then there's the aspect of purely hours and effort alone don't make you strong in all areas. I mean, that might sound like a redundant thing to say. This is a really important thing for people to understand. The notion that, oh, well, are you not good at this guy's not good at this one thing, should practice it more. Well, no, he's already practicing it to the max. No, he isn't. Practice more. If you practice, you get better at it. Well, no, you only get good to a certain degree. And, like, here's the thing to understand. It's crucially difficult to understand this when you talk about weak areas. Because no matter how much you practice and how much effort you put in, it's not necessarily the case that your weakness that you're working on will ever become no longer your weakness. It might relatively become better, but relative to your strengths, it might still be your weakest point. And it also doesn't mean it will ever become a strength. Now, you can work on it a lot and maybe reduce the impact it has, the hindrance it has to your game, and keep working on the strengths and make them go, and that'll make you a better player. But it's very unlikely that you'll ever get to the case that you'll improve to the extent it becomes one of your best. So the key here is to improve, not that it has to be your strength, or that it can be your strength, or that practice and effort make it your strength. Because think about it logically, there's a reason why certain teams who've been playing CSGO for over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, similar lineups, same cores of players, and have practiced certain maps thousands of times, are worse at that map than a brand new lineup of players that form, that become really godlike on that map. Why is that? Because of his strengths and weaknesses, because of the personnel that you have, because of the approach you have to the game. Practice and effort alone don't make you amazing on that. This is another area fans use this logic on. They'll say stuff like, oh, well, yeah, there should be that map in the pool because, you know, if this team, all they need to do is improve and get better on Nuke, or they should just work harder on their Nuke. It's like maybe Nuke is the map that has all the qualities to it, all the components that their skill set doesn't fit, and that their skill set not only is poor compared to, and here's a key factor to understand, but against the best Nuke teams, they'll never be able to match up. Because that's the other thing. You can improve your Nuke. You can make it better. You can take time and put it onto Nuke, make it one of your better maps. But unless it's as good as the best Nuke teams in the world, oftentimes it's going to be a waste of your time to have practiced on it. You're not going to play them often. You're going to ban it often. They're so good on it that it doesn't matter if you make it less weak for you. It's never going to be as good a strength as it is for those guys, which is also the factor to understand here. It's not about just improving, is it? And then there's also the factor that to improve on it, if you really wanted to improve this massively weak map, you might have to put tons of your time and effort in to the extent that you're no longer working on the strengths of your really good map, and then that drops away. Because remember, nothing is static. You don't just stay permanently good on that map. Tactics evolve, strategies, the meta game actually progresses onwards, counters come in that you have to learn how to adapt to, change up positions. So it's a constant effort just to maintain your strength on your best maps. So that's also the way this fan's way of thinking is so naive. It's like the idea that, oh, well, just start practicing nukes. This is not your good map. Well, yeah, well, that would mean I have to take time away from my Inferno and Dust 2, which are my best maps at the moment. See, this logic doesn't work. They're thinking it's like a static thing, like you're bad here now, so you haven't put enough work on it. You're good here, so you don't need to work on it. Doesn't work that way. There's no nuance to this kind of opinion. So in a thread about... Okay, it's actually the thread that was about my thoughts on the ESL World Rankings when they released these rankings. And so one of the contentious points was about organizations getting points. So in the ESL ranking, organizations and players each got half of the points overall. And so if players left, the organization still had half the points. So you've got this ridiculous scenario where LDLC White was ranked like 15th best in the world, despite the fact LDLC White's players have only come like last place at 2 lands and wouldn't be even close to top 15 in any normal ranking system. But because their org kept all the points from when LDLC had the second best team in the world and won a major, had all these top 2s and had all these great finishes. And so you can see how my example there is explained that there's something wrong here. That's patently ridiculous. That players who never played any of those games are getting those points counted towards their ranking because it's also ranking the org. So, as always, there were some people who agreed with ESL's point. So, this point had 13 points at the time. It said, let's be honest, ESL's rankings are a who deserves jobs and money ranking and not a skill ranking. As teams grow into signing longer contracts, like VP did, then these rankings would be better. An organization deserves points if the organization is recognized for finding talent, proper coaching and management, giving their players boot camps and discipline, etc. The scene just isn't ready for it yet, though. Yeah, that's actually, the last point there is the key aspect. The first part of that is a point I saw many people make, but it's the last sentence that's key. The scene just isn't ready for it yet, though. The scene probably never will be ready for that, by the way. Because how can you know from the outside which organizations are finding the talent, like scouting people properly, coaching them, presumably so they become better and become the great team that they are, managing them so they keep the egos together and rosters, etc., giving them proper practice environments, disciplining them correctly. From the outside, we can't know which of these teams are doing this, organizations rather, and I can tell you from as an insider, the majority of these teams aren't doing a very good job in most of those areas. Some of them aren't doing any, like they're not scouting at all, they just get really good players in. They're not coaching them, they let some of them do whatever they want. Management can be very It can be hit and miss. Giving them boot camps and stuff, that's most are doing a decent job of that. Discipline, some of them are doing a terrible job. Players decide a lot of the shit. So the key thing to understand here is there's no point rewarding every org for that when at the moment we don't know which ones are doing it and most aren't doing that. Like at the moment, that's not the case. They should not be rewarded for that because they aren't doing that and it's not even required at the moment to have the best teams. But it also points to something that really annoys me because it's a general fan way of justifying terrible decisions that orgs make in esports, where I understand what they're trying to do, okay. So what people do is they think to themselves, right, well, I want esports to be a real sport and it's becoming a sport and it's come so far in 10 years and in 5 years. And I want to know, in 50 years, could it be like the Major League Baseball or the NFL or the European Premier League? If it gets to that level, then we're going to need some of these sorts of things that are built into those leagues, okay. Now, the problem with that assumption there is the last part, that if it's going to get to that level in 50 years, 20 years, when like those massive leagues are hundreds of years old, then those will be appropriate and meaningful policies to have in place. Sure, who says it's going to get to that level? So the problem is, it's so unlikely this game, CS fucking Go, which we're ranking for right now and tournaments right now we're going to invite people to, is going to get to that level even in 30 or 40 years. So unlikely it is that to fuck up the current system we have and put in inappropriate policies on the basis that in 40 years it would make sense, doesn't make any sense at all, actually. And people will constantly do this. They're willing to give up all the great things we have now, great, unique things about esports and CSGO, for what they think is what is needed for a bigger sport and in the future when it's not needed right now. Wait until that comes, when those leagues are in that position, when all these orgs are doing all these things, then we can have a discussion about rewarding them and giving them part of the points. Because in rewarding them right now for something they didn't do, as you can see by the explanations before, you're fucking over some other teams that did leave an org, etc., but their org hadn't done anything special for them and their org now gets half the points. So actually, it's not appropriate right now. That's the key thing we understand. So instead, pick something which works, is effective, and is appropriate or fair for now, and let the future take care of the future. And so there was another post along those lines. This one only had a few points. It said, if Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick dropped every single player on their team and picked up completely unknown players, I would 100% have faith that they could compete and perform at least half as well as their Super Bowl winning team. Look at college sports. The same schools, organizations are always at the top despite players coming and going every single season. The organizations are able to recruit and develop teams better than others. The organizations play a huge role and the best rookie talents migrate to them because of it. Whether you want to acknowledge it or not, organizations do play a very, very large role in sports. Just not large enough in esports yet, which is exactly what I've already said. So again, he's kind of outlined, again in more detail, giving an example, exactly the point I'm making here, which is that yes, in sports, this is the case. And college sports, especially in America, where it's a big deal, is a great example of that. There's a reason why you see the same American football and basketball schools repeatedly becoming very good, consistently becoming good with totally different players sometimes. Now, there's a few reasons for that. First of all, they have fantastic coaching staffs, and it tends to be that the tenure of how good they are is when they've had the really good coaching staffs. Then they have really good people at scouting, at providing a great environment for the players. The coaches are coaching the players up. The fact that they are so successful is attracting the players to it. At the moment, the only thing that attracts players to big organizations in esports that have had any degree of consistency, and actually there's not really many in CSGO that have had consistently good lineups, is money. If they have enough money, the players will go there. If they don't have enough money, players will even go to brand new orgs like Envious that never had a CSGO history, had no tenure whatsoever. They didn't go there because Envious had some amazing coach. They didn't go there because Envious had a history of scouting players and had scouted them as little rookies and stuff. No, they went as they were the best team in the world at the time, and they went to the highest bidder. There we go. There's no scouting, no coaching per se, nothing special added by any org that a lesser org that just happens to have enough money can offer as well. Especially, here's the key point to make, because the sticker money era now makes a lot of those factors that are to do with sports definitely not applicable to CSGO right now. Because with the way the sticker money works, different teams have different ways of breaking it down. Some of them is like 50-50 split between the team and the players on the sticker money. But some of the orgs, cleverly, have been doing deals where, say they don't have as much liquid money now to pay in terms of actual salary, they'll make a deal with a team like, hey, you're a top team and you're going to do very well and we're going to be popular. You are going to be popular players. So we're going to get a lot of sticker money. So we'll just give you a higher percentage of the sticker money. Well, right there, that component alone means there'll be people going to other orgs, leaving orgs, etc., which doesn't take into account how the rankings are done, the fact that you actually get rewarded for staying with orgs and the org gets rewarded for keeping you and scouting you, know, the stuff they're not doing. Meanwhile, you're actually going to be punished for going to lesser orgs, etc., that haven't done as much and don't have the points from their past players, but who give you a better deal. So actually, this sort of ranking is going to directly, if not directly, fuck with people who get better deals, basically. It's going to mess around with the economics of the industry, because now it rewards people not leaving, which they probably will still leave anyway for the money, but then they're going to get punished in terms of the points. So it's a terrible system. Now then, in a thread that was about... This was the thread where it was called Time's Up for Team Liquid, the one where I explained all the problems I saw with the old Team Liquid lineup before they got Hiko. So, let me see. So actually, this is... Interestingly enough, Hiko's now joined Liquid. But basically, these were a lot of the criticisms that I've seen many times about Hiko and the fact he didn't join Liquid before. And I'll basically go through some of them. These comments are really long, so I can't just read them all out. I'll give you some of the basic gist of them, though. So basically, these are the people who get really mad that he didn't join Liquid with Skadoodle, because they think it's only about the fact that he wanted to promote his personal sponsors, and they think that the other players were loyal to Liquid. And basically, then the people were also mad that Hiko didn't join CLG, because they saw that as him kind of like, because he wouldn't join them, he thinks he's better than them and they must be shit and all the rest of it, blah, blah, blah. And then he only wanted to join an org that was like brand new and was around him, etc., etc. And that when he went to Neolum, they went to shit, and then, you know, it was a bad move, blah, 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 all the rest of it. Now, I'll just make a general point here, because I've gone over this many times, as to why I can understand the reasoning behind many of Hiko's moves, and they only look bad in hindsight when you know that the outcome was different than could have been expected. The reasonable expectation for any of these moves made sense. So, for example, when people get mad about the fact that he wouldn't join Team Liquid and wouldn't join CLG, now the CLG one, there's absolutely reasonable reasons there, perfect reasons there, which is they've consistently shown a tendency towards keeping that same core of players. Those 5 players, with JDM now especially, have played together a long time. They've come up through like open into invite together. They've stuck together all this time. They've consistently shown that they're not going to make roster moves. They're not going to make harsh decisions if one guy's underperforming or isn't good enough at his job, or you need to upgrade to a person who we don't necessarily like or doesn't get along with us personally, but would make the team better. They haven't shown that they're willing to do that. If you're a player like Hiko, if you join CLG now, even if you made CLG the second best NA team, hey, maybe things go amazingly and you make them the best NA team. That might still not be enough to be a top 5 team in the world. That might not be enough to be a top 6 team in the world. Well, Hiko's already been in a top 5, top 6, top 7 team in the world when he was in some of the past Cloud9 lineups. He knows what it's like to get to the semi of a major, to get to the quarterfinals of a major. That's not enough right now. In general, now, when things have all gone to shit, yeah, now he has to make choices for just whatever's available. But back then, he had leverage and bargaining position where he was trying to search out some possible solution to get a team that could be a winning team at a major, could make the final of a major. Now, he did that initially, remember. He made the super team with Dazed and all those guys from my part, but they got banned. Now, that's what started this whole quest. So in the CLG case, I definitely understand why I wouldn't join them. Even if he'd make them a better team, which in itself is debatable because in their playing style, and they've got so many passive players that is. Even if he joined their team, they've got a lot of problems there. They don't use Tarek very well in the team. FNS has questionable calling. There's the factor that they haven't shown a willingness to make the hard decisions. So if anything, you get the feeling that even if they got a bit better, they'd be stuck at that level. They wouldn't go anywhere from there. And then he wouldn't have all the say in the team. They would just outvote him, and he wouldn't be able to get rid of certain players and upgrade. A key thing about Hiko's moves, if you notice, is that either he wants control over the org and the team so he can make the decisions, or he wants to be in teams where they're at least going to listen and let him potentially make moves, such as when he joined Neolum. If Neolum had done well and qualified for ESEA offline, the ESL ESEA Pro League offline finals, which they almost did, remember, then I actually think that he would have then been in a position to get some better players in. Now, when like Liquid's having issues, then people in CLG are wondering, will this player leave? Or people are talking about like, oh, what about all these lesser teams, Elevate, etc., that are doing these roster swaps, Tempo Swarm, swapping up players? This would be the position when he could have got some different players in. A good player here, aggressive guy, a good quality old school player there. That's when he would have been in a position to make moves. The fact that the team had shit results in the end, because it spiraled out of control in the last 3 weeks or so, is what basically made it so he didn't have the option to upgrade the players. He was going in a position that made, of what he had available, the best base level to then build the championship team from. At the beginning, when he still thought he could get a mega team or a team he can upgrade, the other reason not to join Liquid or CLG, by the way, even though they're better than Neolum that he joined and would both be good teams, is because, again, not only would you not achieve that certain level of success, but it's not like you're gonna win anything. It would have been marginally better for him in his career, marginally. And by the way, he might have lost sponsors, etc. He would have had maybe a few extra decent results. I mean, Team Liquid aren't making playoffs of majors. CLG aren't making playoffs of majors. These teams aren't doing anything. They're just doing okay. And then in the context of NA, they're doing well. Yeah, they're not going to do some incredible thing. It'd be one thing if he was joining. Okay, here's the thing. We know now that when Skadoodle joined Cloud9, he won he came top 3 he made the finals of 3 straight international tournaments and did really well. We know that now. At the time when he joined, we didn't know that would happen. We didn't know he'd ever make a final of a tournament. We couldn't even know on a player like him who's incredibly good and joining a team that had a history of being good in the past and good money, etc. We didn't even know in that case. So how can you act as though you know that if he joined Liquid, suddenly they'd do super duper well, and as a result, he's sort of like dissing them by not joining? No, it's ridiculous. The expectations aren't like that, and fans should stop using hindsight to act as though that was the only way it ever could have gone, and that was the most reasonable expectation, and that was always the way things were going to be. No, not at all. Now, here's a thread that was about NBK and his relationship with Kenny S in the new Envious lineup. And so it says, this one had 8 points. It said, he said one thing that he really wanted to be untouched was his stream. Oh, this is about Hiko again. I forgot about this. There's another set of things about Hiko. Like, going on about like how, if he wanted his stream branding to remain the same, his stream sponsors, all these other orgs would make him slap their sponsors on his stream and stuff like that. Therefore, he's just greedy, for wanting to stick streaming, doing his stuff. And then people saying like, I'm sick of this excuse. Does he want to win or does he want to make money? As though those are the two options, by the way. And then people saying like he should have swallowed his pride and joined one of these teams that are better than the team that he joined. Again, I've addressed all these things. Yeah, we know they were better than Neelam, but he was trying to look for the future and build, not the next 2 months where they're never going to achieve anything great. Also, winning, winning what? They wouldn't have won fuck all. They didn't win all. Cloud9 didn't fucking win anything, and they had the best case scenario and actually a dream scenario of everything going super duper well. Also, it's entirely reasonable to want to keep his stream sponsors, etc. What if he joins this team and it goes badly in 6 months and he gets cut and now he doesn't have all those sponsorship deals? Bearing in mind he has all these options to get equally as much money, maybe in 6 months if he had as much success or built to that point. It's actually just good business to do that way. One of the great things that Hiko did by doing all these moves is, first of all, he did all the smartest business moves in terms of money for himself, and it didn't actually have that much of an effect over the last 3 to 6 months on where his placings would have been with any of these teams, very likely. And then secondly, something people really don't get is that in Hiko negotiating with all these teams, for some of these teams to keep their players or to lure players away from the teams Hiko was going to make, or to keep their players from leaving and joining teams with Hiko, some of them had to redo their salaries with those players or pay those players huge signing fees or double the player's base salary or re-up contracts with them for longer. And so by Hiko doing great business, great negotiations, going to all these teams, talking to them, going through all the details, in the end, all the decisions he didn't make, he did make, all the paths he could have gone that he didn't go, indirectly, and to a degree directly, but indirectly in terms of this wasn't his end goal, he actually raised the level of salary and opportunity and financial security for all the NA scene almost at the top level. A whole bunch of the best teams got more salary, better contracts, better situations with their teams working more actively, make sure they're really happy just because of what Hiko did with all of this negotiation and trying to make a super team. You guys don't get that. So even your favorite players who you think he dissed, he fucking helped those guys out. They're in an awesome situation right now. When I read comments like this, where people have no clue what the fuck they're talking about, but don't just say like, and here's my speculation, but then get super rude, aggressive, judgmental. Have you ever seen the movie Terminator 2, Judgment Day? I think it came out in 1991, 1992, one of the all-time great action movies, directed and written by James Cameron, who made the original Terminator. There's a great scene in this movie, where Sarah Connor, the mother of John Connor, who later goes on to be the human resistance fighter in the future, who then sent back this Terminator to protect himself as a boy in the movie because there's a futuristic Terminator coming to kill him. If you haven't seen the movie, I don't know why I'm explaining it. Everyone must have seen this movie. Anyway, so the mother of Sarah Connor, who knows that in the future the Skynet situation is going to go off, the machines become sentient and they nuke the Earth, 3 billion people get killed, and then we go into this post-apocalyptic type future where the machines run everything, Skynet, and they've got all the fucking Terminators killing everyone. She has this dream where, in the dream, she's outside a children's play park and she's clinging onto these railings, this metal railing fence. And in the play park, she sees all these kids playing swinging on swings and stuff. And She sees herself as a younger woman playing with John, the future leader, as like a young child. And she's like, yeah, hey, John. And you can't actually hear what they're saying. She's like, yeah, yeah. And then in the background, you just suddenly see the nuke go off and like do like the mushroom cloud type scenario, blow up. And it goes through all this playground and they're all just getting blown away and all their flesh just getting like burned up and just wrecked completely. And she's just on this chain link fence going, no, because she'd been like screaming to those people like, oh, watch out, it's going to blow up or something. And then she just gets burned to like completely to a crisp, like, Like, that's actually how I want that scene to happen, basically, when I read Reddit comments like these, when I read threads like these that give me fucking brain cancer. Like, when I'm reading that, I want it to be like this. All those Redditors are in that playground there, like kids, you know, playing, naively doing shit, playing little games. I'm on the other side of the chain link fence, but rather than being like, no, watch out, get rid, I'm just like, fuck this shit. And then the nuke, I want the nuke to come out. I actually trigger the nuke. That comes off. Blows everyone, and I'll even die. I don't mind. I'll get burned to a crisp. I'll pay that price as long as this whole fucking world gets wiped clean. Because that's all I can't handle it, mate. I can't fucking handle this level of idiocy. It's just unreal. That's me every day with Redditors. So then there was a thread that was about one of the episodes of By the Numbers with me and Richard Lewis, where, as usual, because people can't get over this. In threads that didn't have anything to do with it, people keep bringing up the fact that Richard Lewis is abrasive or insulting when he replies to people, here's the key context, who have insulted or unnecessarily criticised him. Now, that last part is key there. He doesn't just pick out people who are like, big fan of yours and go, fuck you, asshole, you piece of shit, and who are you anyway? I make more money than you, and you will never be anything to me. That would be entirely unreasonable. But I notice that's the way people almost try to present it. So there was a comment here that said, there's a difference between that, as in people being reasonable and ignoring people, or criticising people. Here's the thing. He's saying, I'll give you the context. What he's saying the difference is between replying with insults to someone who's insulted you. And so he said, there's a difference between that and then someone saying, I'm not a fan of drinking and casting, and then responding with, fuck you. Now, this is a great topic to bring up because I think I'm one of the few people who has insight into this. So the reason why this has been presented as though that's totally unreasonable. So the original comment was, I'm not a fan of drinking and casting, and the response was, fuck you. Now, first of all, from what I remember, that particular comment was not responded to with fuck you. It was responded to in an abrasive manner, but it wasn't just like fuck you and that was it. Secondly, that original comment, he's presented it here as though that's an entirely reasonable thing to say, right? Say, I'm not a fan of drinking and casting. Yeah. If you just said in isolation to no one in particular or to the general public, I'm not a fan of drinking and casting, that would be entirely reasonable. And if Richard Lewis then responded to your tweet, found your tweet, responded to it and said, fuck you, that would be totally unreasonable, the behavior of a sociopath, and actually he would have deep-seated emotional and psychological problems he should definitely get seen to now. But that wasn't the context, was it? And that wasn't even vaguely the way it was. Because here's the thing, someone didn't just say that. What happened was, that comment becomes ridiculous when you realise the person involved. So Richard Lewis is sat there on Twitter. The person involved replies to Richard Lewis. Reply just means you put the name in front, and so he's going to see the message directly. They put the message to him or with a mention saying, I'm not a fan of drinking and casting. Well, that's an entirely unsolicited opinion. So you don't think it's ridiculous to essentially tell someone, like, I don't really like what you're doing, when they haven't asked for your opinion and you don't know them, and you're just telling it directly to them, presumably because you want them to change their behaviour, as in don't do any of that stuff. And that's what the mandate of the event is, or just to insult them and fuck with them and hurt them a little bit. Like, there's a great anecdote I remember where Ricky Gervais said that he was walking down the street. This is a great way of illustrating this. He was walking down the street and this guy sort of like clocks him, and then he realises by the way the guy's looking at him, like, oh, this guy must know that, like, he must recognise him from TV or something. Ricky Gervais, by the way, is the guy who created like The Office, Extras, a bunch of shows. And the guy comes over and basically tells him, like, yeah, I'm a big fan of The Office. And Ricky's like, oh, okay, cool, thanks. And he just goes, the Extras was shit, though. Which is just like, what? Why do you have to say that part? Like, okay, tell me that you're a fan of The Office, that's great. But to tell me, the person who made Extras, directly to my face, like, the Extras was shit, is actually rude, unsolicited, and hence why it's so rude. And just, what does it accomplish? You know, it just hurts his feelings. And actually, saying that you like this other thing doesn't make up for the fact you just dissed the guy for something else he did. Now, imagine if you were... let me think. Imagine if the people you talk about, Richard Lewis, me, other content creators, but who have some level of notoriety or high profile. Imagine if we were just normal people and you were messaging us with comments like this, okay? Oh, yeah, let's make this really sci-fi for you. Really crazy to imagine this. Imagine if we were like normal people, but we let you follow us as normal people and get access to like our thoughts on things. Now imagine that you message that sort of a thing, just unsolicited, to that normal person. Be kind of fucked up, right? Why do you have to be rude to the person? Make the comment generally, don't make it towards them. Say it generally anyway. They don't follow you on Twitter, no problem, they won't see it. Oh, that's right, wait a minute, we are normal people, and we do just happen to let you follow our thoughts and our videos, and so as a result, you can directly contact us and be cunts to us. So if you can't see how that's unsolicited and how, yes, it doesn't seem that bad on the surface, but when you know the context, that is kind of unnecessary. And also, he didn't reply, fuck you. But I'm just sick of seeing that sort of bullshit. Like, there's something very suspicious about the fact the person removes all the nuance and the context from that sort of a comment before they explain it. Just noticed I didn't put my phone on silent. Right. Anyway, let's go down to the next one. Man, I've got so many comments in here, I might have to skip a few. Let's see. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, I thought what I'd respond to here, actually, is that huge Raheem post that he made, where he made all this inside info and all this stuff, all his thoughts on stuff and his perspective on stuff. Because, by the way, it's ages old now, so no one's going back and tweeting upvoting or downvoting any of that shit now. But I thought there was a few points made there that no one really got into. So remember this first part, I'll read it out, actually, where it says... Let's see. There's the part where... Okay. So it's the part where he says, and he's quoting himself, "Come on, Raheem, do you funny babam things?" End quote. Confused me a lot. It's almost impossible to be funny per request. Now, this is a great comment, because that whole babam things is not in any way a derogatory thing to say. That is literally his shtick, is to go like, babam, who rocket launcher, la 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 la. That's literally what he does. Now, it sounds demeaning, doesn't it? Because it sounds like something shit, because that's what he does. What he does is shit. Therefore, just them referencing it, which they didn't say was shit, does sound kind of silly. Like, well, just tell them to do babam and really crazy sounds. That's what you do. That is what you fucking do. Are you now realizing, is this like an epiphany that you're indirectly coming to, but not of the full magnitude? That is really what you fucking do. That is your quality. And that, guess what? To others, we can't see how there's any talent or nuance or fucking sort of like technique behind doing that. To us, we really do think you just watch and go, ho la la la, lo la la la, rocket launcher, M16, blah blah blah, bing 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 bing. Yeah, to us, you're a fucking soundboard, mate. That's why we can't understand the concept that you need to, like, go like the fucking beginning of Raging Bull and just, like, look in the mirror like, come on, champ, get you, psych yourself up to do that sort of shit. So, by the way, that is literally your shit. If you find that disparaging, you're indirectly admitting your own stuff is shit. Then the idea that you can't be funny on request. Well, first of all, you can. I knock it out the park every day, mate, so I'm better than you. Secondly, the idea that you can't do it on request, I'd stop being a caster then, because that is your style of casting, to do funny shit. It's not to do analysis of the game. So if you essentially are saying, I can't do my casting on request, I wouldn't go to events where you're going to have to do it on request, mate. It sounds like you can't do your own job. Also, the idea, and by the way, everyone I know can be entertaining and do their personality and do their core qualities of casting on request. Literally, that's what they do for their job at events. Someone tells them, do this game, please, and they turn it on and they start going. If you can't, it sounds like you don't have a very good system in place. Also, there's a part where he says, let's have a look. This is just the way this is phrased, crack me the fuck up. I'll try and say, I'm literally going to have to keyword search for cunt here. Because he used the word, by the way, not me. Although I love that word. Right, it says here, they briefly explained what happened and asked me to make a short statement on Twitter that there's no bully action and we are fine. I told them that I won't lie by stating that we are fine. If you're asking me to make a misstatement, I have to be honest and share all the details of behaviour. If I'm such a cunt, why did I lose such a great moment to bash Richard? I think he even said cunt again. Let me see. Is there another one? I mean, that in itself is it. And then later on, he says sort of a similar thing, like if he's a cunt or if he's such a bad person, why didn't they just fire him outright when, you know, he said he had problems working with people? Now, that's incredibly childish logic there, by the way. Like, the idea that because you're not doing a great job or you're having issues with someone, that the event's just going to go, Raheem, yeah, what is it? You're fucking fired. Get out, cunt. Like, okay. The fact that someone didn't instantly fire you from an event where they need you to still work and relieve other casters, by the way, doesn't mean they don't think you're a cunt. Doesn't mean you're not a cunt. That's not some sort of proof. That logically doesn't work, by the way. You haven't, like, figured out the solution there. Also doesn't mean you are a cunt. But I'm just saying that doesn't work as logic. I mean, that whole logic of, like, I am hired and I remain gainfully employed, therefore I am not cunt. Like, is this like some sort of next level Raheem version of like the fucking Descartes, like, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am hired, therefore I am not cunt. Like, not sure that works, mate. Not sure that's like a fundamental basis of rational materialism that we could base a whole field of the physical sciences on, you know, of the science of casting, I guess, in your case. So then there was another comment in the same thread. This one had fucking 859 points, and that's an incredibly large amount of points. So it says here, both called each other liars. So if a third party presents a statement about what really went on, all respect lost for the one lying. This is how childish people are. First of all, nobody's necessarily lying. It's entirely possible that they both think one thing happened, both say one thing happened, which is at odds and mutually exclusive with the other person's, but as a result of subjective qualities, they characterized the way someone was saying something a certain way, they misheard something, there was miscommunication, they misinterpreted, they misread the situation, they subjectively made judgment calls which they put into this as though it's facts that aren't facts, are just from their nervous system, their sensory data. It sums up the age of the internet, that people just have to they think that the main tool here isn't just to get people's perspectives and theories, it's that at the end of it you have to like decide or judge who won, who lost. And whoever loses, all respect is lost for him. He's a piece of shit, sociopath, worst person, and we vote him off the island and he's banished forever from esports. No, it's not like that. It's not like fucking Mega City 1 in Judge Dredd where they fucking eject you out of the mega city and you have to wander the post-apocalyptic wilderness for the rest of your days because you've committed the ultimate crime. No, it's not like that. It's ridiculous. Also, you're not in a position to judge. You don't know half the situation here. You can maybe speculate. Sure, that's fine. But to be so harsh in terms of how people judge is just ridiculous here. And then also, that's just the fucking tiredest old saying, like, all respect lost. How about just some respect? I mean, what did the person do in the first place to get all of your respect? Presumably do some really good work, do a lot of things, do some things you enjoyed. Okay, but now because they said one thing that you didn't like, or you think they're lying, you all lost all respect. Well, then your respect probably wasn't a great currency anyway, was it? It was worth fuck all anyway. It was like Zimbabwean dollars or whatever the fuck that one was, where it's like you get like $1 million in a suitcase now and it buys an orange. Who gives a fuck about your respect, mate? So here's a one where someone said, let me see. Okay, so this was it was a thread actually that was someone made a video of my best impressions. It was just funny impressions of fucking Happy and Swag and all the rest of them, RPK in existence. And someone made a comment there where he said, well, his knowledge, they're talking about me, and the notion was that my style of analysis and casting is only based on knowing the history of players. And he takes umbrage with this. So he says, well, his knowledge isn't that obscure. It's just that he knows like the entire history of CS and thus can tell you which situations each player will thrive and die in. That's like a positive comment. Then a guy replies, he can't tell you which situations people will thrive and die in because every match is different. People get better and people get worse. Things happen and players/teams don't always play how they used to or how they should. Now, that's genius because that actually, essentially, he's not just saying that my analysis doesn't work and is like isn't effective or doesn't have any basis in rational reasoning, but he's actually, essentially, if you think it through, denying any possibility of the existence of patterns, tendencies, or general playing styles and team styles. This is the classic sort of fan who is entirely resistant to even the concept of analysis. Every topic in history, in esports, in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and sports, and every topic in all of history can be broken down and examined. You can create models, and the model, by the way, isn't perfect, but you model data and patterns and tendencies, and you form links between them, and you come up with general guidelines or rules which apply to the majority of the cases for so on. And then when you know all this interesting information, you know someone's past, etc., you can apply it to the future and make reasonable predictions, which is what you're supposed to be able to do with scientific theories. Make predictions about what you think will happen happen now, or the way things should play out. And if something doesn't play out that way, you can explain possibly why it wouldn't. Like if they aren't able to do this and the other team exploit this aspect, then they'll lose. The idea that different things happen in every match, well, of course they do, but player tendencies remain the same. Stylistic aspects remain the same. There's a reason why, without knowing what would happen in every single round and every single gunfight, I was able to predict that Envious would win map 1, Dust 2, against Fnatic in the DreamHack Tours final. Despite the fact I know Fnatic's a better team, Envious was in a slump, but on Dust 2, the way Envious played Dust 2, the certain player tendencies of how they played the terrorist side meant that they were going to be better than Fnatic in that particular situation. It'd be very hard for Fnatic to beat them. So it didn't matter that the rounds played out differently, that ended up being the overall result, and the overall analysis was sound and had a basis in the past. I mean, if you go through this guy's perspective, if every round's different and every player plays different, and people get better and people get worse and all the rest of it, then how can anyone make analysis? It doesn't exist. There's nothing you can say. It's just throwing darts at a random board, right? Just a ridiculous perspective. There's this thread here where what's funny is this has already been kind of... Actually, I'll skip that one. There was one about Envious there, but I guess the major probably decided that already. So let me see. Okay, here we go. This is a great one. This is about... A thread was about getting to global elite as an average player. So a topic many people on Subreddit are interested in. They want to get better. They want to get hit at global elite. Feel that validation. Feel like they've improved. So this post had 38 points. Might I add, a very important aspect to leveling up, beside the basic stuff like good aim and good game sense, is confidence. The reason I made it from Gold Nova to Legendary Eagle Master reasonably fast was because I became confident in myself. I can out-aim the opponent. I can outplay the opponent. I can clutch. It doesn't matter. If I can't, it doesn't matter. I will try better next time. TLDR, be confident in your own abilities. You will have a significant advantage over those who aren't. Edit, knowing when to act and when not to is also important. The first step, though, is defeating your fear of losing. Now, some of the basics, the highest... With no detail, going to the highest level of just the basics of the concepts. There's some great concepts here. You should try to be confident. You should be confident in your own game and not be afraid. It's different to be confident and not afraid, but you shouldn't be afraid of losing. Shouldn't be afraid of trying. Shouldn't be afraid of thinking be optimistic, thinking things can work out. Unfortunately, this guy goes too deep with it. Where he makes this the primary motivating reason. The primary reason you can become the best. And essentially, it goes on to some sort of... You remember that thing, The Secret, where they thought like positive thinking was just a way to change the world outside you, and they tried to use some quantum mechanics bullshit reasoning as to why you would like change the whole world outside yourself just by thinking of like, I'm going to have a Ferrari, I'm going to have a Ferrari, and having like a vision board with a Ferrari on and a great job and stuff. The reason that was bullshit is because it took some basics, which are clearly the case. So positive thinking puts you in a good frame of mind, keeps you working towards goals and solutions instead of giving up. Visualization, seeing how things will work in your mind so that the mind has the shortcuts built into it that when you then train, become sort of easy macros to execute something in a fluid manner. And maybe by visualizing, you get a better sense of how the pieces fit together and how they become one fluid motion. The problem is, his stuff's going almost into the level of affirmation shit that people say in the mirror. Like, imagine this guy waking up in the morning, like, going into the mirror like, good morning, I love you. You're going to hit Legendary Eagle Master today. I just know it. You're going to keep climbing from Gold Nova. You can out-aim all those guys. You can outplay the opponent. You can clutch. You're beautiful. And don't let anyone take that away from you. Like, saying all that shit to yourself isn't going to then make you in the game improve. To improve, like, the idea that, like, I can clutch this round. I meet my challenges head on. I am a strong, powerful, independent woman. I mean, CSGO matchmaking star. I am beautiful. I'm magnificent. Good job. I will find a partner who loves and respects. I mean, duo partner for matchmaking. Like, this is the scenario where, like, in this particular world, okay, it doesn't actually matter. Yes, you should work, you should have a good frame of mind. Mentality is important. But realistically, what will make you better, here's a real piece of advice for people who want to improve in their matchmaking ranks. Spend 90% of your time working on the fundamentals of the game. Drill your techniques, work on positioning, go over past games you played, and understand where you made choices that worked, but were actually fundamentally inefficient or ineffective decisions which just happened to work that time and won't work in the future. Watch demos of players who have a similar style to you or similar skill set relative to the pro level, who you can then copy things that make sense from, try and understand what they're doing, and work on those basic fundamentals. Your spray, your bursting, correct money management, correct team play of how to follow someone up, when to pull back off them, when to not commit to a fight, how to make aggressive plays, but make them smart instead of just wholly aggressive. Work on these things, and this is how you will climb ranks. Just all this like bullshit, that alone won't do it for you, mate. That won't get you there. I mean, we live in a world, remember, where you could be playing, and if you're a fantastic player, it's not going to matter. You could have fucking traffic going on, you could have drilling sounds outside, you could have kids swearing at you, fucking idiot, why didn't you back me up? You could have guys shouting, move, bitch, get out the way. It doesn't matter, as long as you're really good, if you work on all the fundamentals and you do it properly, you're going to have success. Don't go into some cult level bullshit, please. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should make my own compound out in the desert somewhere and invite kids there for positive mental outlook, rehabilitation, and charge them massive amounts of money. So, same thread, there was a guy who said, I don't know what mouse excel is, and I have it off. What does it do to specifically make it so bad? And someone replies, with it off, if you move your mouse, it will be a 1-to-1 ratio in distance every time, with the exception of most, if not all, laser mice that have inherent acceleration in the hardware, very small amount. With it put on, your crosshair moves depending on how fast you move your mouse pad. He means mouse, but okay. E.g., flicking will put you further than where you would have been with it off. Why it's so bad is because you need to be more accurate memorizing you moving your mouse back and forth, say 5 cm in real life, to flick from long to short on dust with mouse excel off. Having mouse excel would change the distance each time depending on the speed you move your mouse. So you're unable to distinguish how much faster or how much shorter of a distance you need to move your mouse to accommodate for the extra distance you gained by speed, then you'd be inaccurate. Now, that's actually entirely wrong, what he's saying there. Or it's very poorly mischaracterized. Because it's obviously true that you're going to move a different distance each time based on the speed. But that's it. The speed is the constant factor. And so by learning whatever setting you keep your mouse excel at, you will, in time, your muscle memory will learn what kind of a speed to move at to accurately move a certain distance. But now you have more control over it. Now, there's a very consistent control that anyone can understand without mouse excel, but I've used mouse excel for many years. I don't use it at the moment, but I've used it in the past in Quake and in CS versions, and I could be as accurate, more precise than other people who had good aim also, because I was used to it. Now, the key point is, his last part is totally wrong there, where he says that you're not going to be able to distinguish how much faster or how much further it's going to move, etc. That's the whole point. By training using this, because the value stays the same, but it's a multiplier, so if you move twice as fast, you're going to move twice as far. Because it's going to work like that, it's a situation that actually you will learn that sort of principle in your mind. It will become naturally built into how you play. And so as a result, you will know how far to move it, and you will be accurate, and you will be able to make flick shots. It'll just take longer to get used to. The reason why you know it works, by the way, is because this is how your arms work in real life. In real life, you don't have to move at the same particular speed. You can move super fast if you want. You know, the reason why you can drop something and my hand can flick out and get it like that, I didn't have to calculate in my brain how fast I'm going to go when I'm doing this, and then it's going to... I know roughly the speed and how much distance I will cover when I do so. Axel's actually fine. I would recommend most people don't use it because you're going to keep fucking with the setting. You need to get a good setting, basically, understand what you're doing, and stick with it for a decent amount of time. Not long, by the way, maybe 3 to 4 months. And then you will get used to it, and then you'll get the benefits of Axel, which is, for example, with Axel, I can move really quickly if I'm in the close range and you run up behind me. I can do a 180 on you quickly, but then long range, I can move really slowly and I can aim with super low sense and just be spraying the fuck out of you or doing perfect burst technique. So it actually has its own advantages. It's not better and it's not worse than consistent no Axel normal sensitivity. It just has different strengths. And so depending on what your game is and your skill sets are, you might want to use it, you might not. Now, here's one. So I've heard this made many, many points. So people mentioned about the fact that in Source, there's a lot of Source fans who always bring up the idea that Source had these tournaments that had 500k prize pools, and that was bigger than CS 1.6 events. Yes, 500k prize pool is much bigger than 1.6 events. But actually, the CS Source component of CGS, which is what he's referring to, Championship Gaming Series in 2007, 2008, was not bigger than past CS 1.6 purses. There were early CPLs that had purses of 300,000, 200,000 for one CS 1.6 or 1.3, 1.1 event. Whereas CGS was 500k for your whole franchise that you won. The franchise was made up of 10 players, 5 of them CSGO, 5 of them from other games like fighting games, FIFA, racing games. Those were the other 5 made up. Also, the points. So first of all, it's only 250k for your team to win in there anyway. Which, by the way, 250k is still obviously a lot more than anyone won first place in 1.6. But there's also a ridiculous way of phrasing it here, in as much as the problem with those Source tournaments is they weren't just Source tournaments for a start off. And in fact, Source was one of the least important components of those tournaments. They had a point system where your franchise won the match, not the team. So you could have the best Source team, as EG in fact did, not EG, as Complexity had the best Source team with Rambo and Fraud and all those guys. In the first season of CGS, they won the individual tournament, but in the team franchise tournament, they didn't do well at all. In fact, I don't think they even qualify for the Worlds for that. Because the rest of their franchise wasn't good enough. Because the points system not only counted all the games together, but had a different scoring system for each game. And so as a result, the most valuable games were not Counter-Strike. Because in Counter-Strike, even in a win, the other team's going to get a whole bunch of rounds. So they're scoring points on you, and you're not having a massive differential. Whereas in these other games, the best example is in fighting games, if you had a really dominant player, they could win all the rounds, but you could have gotten super close. Like in a CS match, you could have gotten super close, got them down to low health, but because you didn't win that round, you don't get any points. They get all the points. And the best was in the driving games, because someone has to finish first there, and they would get a massive amount of points. You know, people who finished third would get, like, I think next to none or very few points. And so actually racing games and fighting games were the most important here. And the reason why I bring that up is because this has always brought up this Source issue of that they won 500k as a way of bigging up the Source team that was for the Birmingham Salvo, which is OD Dignitas Owner's team, where they had Rattlesnake and those guys on, and they won the tournament, and their Source team was part of the winning tournament, so they got the 500k prize purse. Problem is, in their team, the best player was actually something like, I think off the top of my head, I think it was like either a female at one of the racing games or the fighting games. It actually wasn't the Source team. The Source team did good, but it's not even the case that they were definitely the best Source team, and they didn't contribute as much to the points. So it's entirely inaccurate when you're characterizing Source and 1.6 history to make out like Source had a big history because of this tournament. This tournament actually was entire exception and doesn't apply to any of the metrics that we think of in terms of big tournaments and prize purses and actually winning from that game. It was basically the other games that won those tournaments. It's just happenstance that Source got as much money within it. Now, let me see. So here's a great comment. Obviously, this is after the fact. I should have done this pretty much before the tournament, but I'll just great one anyway. So this guy says, it was about my thoughts on the groups of ESL 1 Cologne. So it says, this isn't the first or second time, for that matter, that NiP has come into a major looking shaky. It would be surprising if they make another finals run, but by no means would it be a what the fuck, where the fuck did that result come from? Now, by what logic? Because even what he just said there is kind of blowing my mind. It would be surprising if they make a finals run, okay, but it wouldn't be a what the fuck, where did that come from result. So presumably, it would be surprising to him because he knows NiP weren't in great form, so they shouldn't make the final, but it wouldn't be a what the fuck. Now, first of all, it should be a what the fuck if they're not in good form and they haven't made any big finals and now they're going to make this big final. Say, the idea that it wouldn't be surprising because in the past they've done it doesn't make any sense to me. Well, that was the past. That was against different teams. That was with them, their own team being at a different level. That was with all these different factors. Almost every factor is different. So why would the past inform this tournament now? And it didn't, obviously, but why would it anyway? I don't understand the logic behind what that's supposed to mean in that particular respect. Like, why would the fact that they made the final of a tournament in DreamHack Winter 2013 mean that it wouldn't surprise you if they made the final of a tournament at ESL 1 Cologne in August of 2015? Over a year and a half later. What would the connection be? What causation is going on there? That's where people make the mistake of mistaking correlation for causation. So something has happened a bunch of times in a row. Therefore, it will likely happen again. No, why? You have to look at what the factors that made it happen before are and look, are they present in this time? And they weren't, and hence it didn't happen. There's also the case that this is a whole myth that people keep presenting, that NiP always were in these problems and they came in the major and did super sick. No, mate. There have been 6 majors. Here's how the 6 majors went. First major, DreamHack Winter 2013. NiP were far and away the second best team in the world. The only team who was actually better than them in the world was Very Games, who at the time had got a mini streak of dominance, had done very well, won 3 out of the last 4 events, but NiP was still far and away the second best team in the world. Very good team. Nobody was close in terms of second best team in the world. The third best team wasn't close to taking NiP over at that point. So when NiP came into that tournament, actually, them making the final is entirely reasonable. The only way they reasonably wouldn't have made the final is if they'd have got the best team in the world before the final, which they actually did. They got them in the semi-final, Very Games, but even then they beat them. So actually, it was entirely reasonable they'd make the final of that one. So that one's bullshit. They should have made the final there. Next tournament, EMS1 Katowice. Now, coming into this tournament, NiP was still ranked second best team in the world. The best team in the world was HeatoN overall, just because we hadn't had many tournaments. They'd won the February DreamHack Invitational, beating NiP. And so even though they had the loss at ESEA, just in terms of overall rankings, there wasn't enough tournaments and placings to kind of de-rank them. And they still were considered the best overall. They obviously went out in the group stage. Second best team in the world, still convincingly NIP. As a result, you'd expect them to make the final. They did make the final. They lost to Virtus Pro there. Third merger of CSGO, ESL1 Cologne 2014. Now, this is the one where, to a degree, NiP came in shaky. Now, their very recent form was shaky, their last 2 to 3 events, because they'd gone out in 5th to 6th or something at ESEA Invite Season 16, and they'd got out 5th to 8th quarterfinals to Dignitas, a team they always used to beat up on, at Gfinity 3. So that's correct. Those two are right up there. The recent form was very shaky. But what people forget is they were still, just by the way the rankings work, overall ranked number 1 team in the world. No one else had done anything in the meantime to be able to overtake that ranking. Like iBuyPower had won ESEA, didn't make their number 1. Virtus Pro had won Gfinity 3, but they'd had a drop off of enough since EMS1 Katowice. That didn't make them number 1 consensus. HeatoN was doing well, but even they, with their second place there and some thirds and fifths, they hadn't got enough. Na'Vi had won Star Ladder and then had second at DreamHack Summer, but then their results had gone down a bit, and overall they didn't have enough overall the time. So overall, NiP was still just by a very slim margin hanging on to the number 1 ranking. Now, the recent form and the way their team had dropped off, they weren't a good team anymore. They were not as good as the team that had got them the ranking, and they were spiraling down. And we saw after that major, they continued to go down and down and down to the absolute dumps of finishing like 9th place at ESWC or something ridiculous. So they did come into that in a sense shaky, but even then they still had the overall number 1 ranking. Now, I still wouldn't have picked them to go to the final of that one. I would have said like semis probably at best. That's probably more reasonable. So that was a surprise, but it's still not as ridiculous as you make it out. It's definitely not the same as now. Now they don't even have the ranking anymore. Then you go to the next major, DreamHack Winner 2014. Now it is the case for this one. This is the shaky one. Because coming into this one, Fnatic is the best team in the world by far. LDLC, second best team by far. Then you've got teams like Virtus Pro and Na'Vi and Dignitas who are hanging around the next level, who are dangerous. Then you've got dangerous dark horses like iBuyPower, these sorts of teams out there. Na'Vi, I already picked them. So as a result, in this scenario, since NiP's just changed the player, it's their first event with him. Yes, you wouldn't expect them to make the final this one. It's unreasonable to think they would have. They had an incredible run as a result. And the fact they made the final wasn't because in the past they made the final. It's because Makaleli played some of the games of his life in that Virtus Pro series. As a team, they played phenomenally on Inferno, a map that had not been a strong map for them before. They made it their home map for that tournament. They beat teams that it was the home map of, one of them, Virtus Pro, LDLC. They played phenomenally, and as a result, that's why they made that final. Then you go to ESL1 Katowice this year. Now, this one, you wouldn't have expected them to make the final, but they by no means came into the event shaky. They came into the event as, let me think, a top 4 team in the world, like 4th or 5th best team in the world, certainly. If not 3rd best team, they were around that sort of level. VP was slumping, HeatoN was doing decently, but not good enough still, not winning events. Fnatic were overall, Fnatic LDLC were envious then, were clearly number 1, number 2. VP was slumping a bit. Na'Vi, people weren't so sure of. Like, they hadn't done anything in a long while. They hadn't been to any tournaments since the last one, basically outside of their own region. So actually, it's not unreasonable that they could have made the final on that one, but probably more reasonably semi-finals, best case scenario for that one. And they managed to have a miraculous run, and they almost, by the way, did go out in the semi-final, but made the final. Now you come to this last one. This one, they're coming into, it's already over, but you know what I mean, with the worst possible form ever. Worst form, ranking's the lowest it's ever been, no strengths on any maps, haven't changed a new player to have any possible unforeseen upside. The only thing that made people think they'd do really well was this whole scrim hype, and then using this correlation causation misunderstanding that, since they've always made the final, they'll always make the final now. It didn't work out, did it? So how did those factors help them here? They didn't, because they weren't present. So Right. So there was, on the thread that was about ESL announcing the details of their anti-doping policy, someone said, congrats on the massively over-the-top knee-jerk response to an overblown issue, which is obviously, I mean, I agree with that. You went overboard on it completely. And then this guy says, everyone should be thanking Semphis. Thanks, Semphis. Right. Here's an example of where linear logic and thinking kills me. I can't handle it. It is not Semphis's fault that ESL imposed these specific anti-doping policies. Now, indirectly, he was the cause of doping becoming a discussion, and ESL, separate to that, deciding it was an issue, then separate to that, deciding something must be done about that, then separate to that, deciding these particular policies. Semphis saying Cloud9 were all on Adderall at this tournament did not force ESL to do these specific policies, which is the specific policies we're disagreeing with. Even if people agree with the overall approach of anti-doping, some people didn't like the specific policies. So that linear logic doesn't work. Just because that was the initial trigger point, it's not a chain that goes like that. There was many instances that could have gone entirely differently and were other people's own free will beyond what Semphis has done. Remember, Semphis could say that, and no one could even make a big deal out of it. People could make a big deal out of it. ESL could go, oh, we don't mind about that. ESL could say, it might be an issue, but we're looking at it in the future. There's a million options here. It doesn't work that way. And in general, people have a problem of doing that, where they blame the first point in the chain or the last point where they think it could have been different. So same thing. There was, on the same thread, someone said about how, like, so theoretically, because it was saying about how if you have, like, a doctor's note, then you could get certain drugs that you could use there, presumably Adderall most directly, but it said, so theoretically speaking, if nothing shows up with a license/card for medicinal marijuana, that's tantamount to a doctor's note, since it's signed by a doctor and is essentially the same as a prescription. And then a guy replies saying, according to the rules posted here, that should be legal. If the doctor says nothing needs to be, basically on weed, to cope with stress, he can light one up mid-game. I mean, I know what you're saying there as a general point, and you would be right if you were talking about stuff like Adderall, where it also is acceptable in other countries with the prescription. But since medicinal marijuana isn't allowed in Germany anyway, it doesn't matter what note you have from a USA doctor, you're not going to be allowed to light up a joint or use it anyway. And by the way, people like this, I'm worried for you guys. Don't think because you have medicinal marijuana, you can board airplanes, go to other countries. Well, I've got a doctor's note. Yeah, that works in the jurisdiction of where you're from, mate. That's how governments and laws work, you know. I can't just come from my country and go, well, in my country, it's legal to have a wife who's 12, so I'm going to just marry a 12-year-old from this country. Like, no, that's not going to work, is it? You can't do that. Now then, the same person, same thread, ESL Anna had made the initial statements from ESL, and there was all these comments about what ESL's reasoning was for the policies, etc. So there was a long post here with some of the rationale from ESL that I wanted to address. So it said, once esports makes it to the Olympics, that will be something to consider. However, leagues, because I think people were talking about the fact that, what the fuck, I should really put all the context for this, shouldn't I? Oh, it's where Scoots had said that in the Olympics, they always test the winner, because obviously that's someone who you want to see if that guy's cheating, don't you? So once esports, she says, once esports makes it to the Olympics, that will be something to consider. However, leagues such as NFL or NBA test only randomly and don't make a specific case of testing their winners. We feel that's the best solution for now, and ESL One Cologne will see only randomized drug testing. So they won't just test the winners, they'll just test randomly. Let's break this down part by part. Okay, so once esports makes it to the Olympics, that will be something to consider. Well, if the rationale behind why the Olympics do it makes sense now, then consider it now. Just because the Olympics do it with their rationale in the Olympics doesn't mean, well, therefore for us to do it, we should be in the Olympics. No, that doesn't follow again. So if there's a good reason as to why the Olympics do it, and you look at it and it makes sense, because you're implying it, maybe it does, because one day when they're in the Olympics, you'd be fine with it. If it makes sense now, just apply that now, mate. You don't have to wait for it to go to the Olympics. That doesn't make any sense. However, leagues such as NFL or NBA test only randomly and don't make a specific case of testing their winners. Again, if the rationale behind why the NFL and NBA do that method doesn't make sense, then there's no reason to do it that way in esports. Because, well, to use your own logic, when esports is the NFL and NBA, then we'll do it. Well, no, that's not. It's not the NFL, but presumably you think there's a good reason why, which is that they do. So can you tell us what that reason is? No, you just told us that because they do it that way. I mean, you haven't really said anything. You haven't even said because they do it that way, we do it that way, but that's the implication. So the NFL and NBA don't do random tests. Okay, where's the merit behind this? What's the argument here? You're just telling us a fact, and then there's no connection to why you're doing it. Again, quoting, "We feel that's the best solution for now, and ESL1 will see only randomized drug tests." So essentially, all you're saying there is, we think this is the best. Like, that's not an answer to a question asking why a specific procedure is being implemented. Like, it suggests that either you don't know why it's being implemented, or that you are just copying arbitrarily a chosen sports league. You just picked a sports league and you said, well, they do it that way, therefore we do it that way, and therefore we think that's the best. I mean, imagine someone asking you this, like, as a line of questioning. Imagine how irritating this would be. Why did you choose to... Like, imagine... Okay, let me think of it. I've got to make it an analogy. So, okay, imagine the analogy is, okay, in Portugal, they did some sort of drug policy change where they, like, legalized or decriminalized a lot of drugs so that... It's not that they were legal. I think it's that you just didn't go to jail or have any sort of public punishment. So as a result, they could deal with a lot of issues of heavy drug use and take a lot of the criminal aspect out and get rid of a lot of the problems. So imagine you asked someone who was going to implement the Portuguese drug policy in their country. Like, okay, so why did you implement Portugal's drug policy? Because we thought it was the best. Yeah, but why is that though? Because Portugal uses it? Yeah, but what about this other approach? Which has famously been used in Germany, and it allows for these social consequences, like X, Y, and Z to take place. Yeah, but that's from Germany, and we're not Germany or doing what Germany does, so we're going to use Portugal's. Can you see how infuriating that? Like, the person's not answering anything you said there. They're just actually restating the fact that they're doing this. Like, they've never explained that's not an answer or an explanation or even a description of why they're doing it. Also, just that last part about, like, we feel that's the best solution for now, right? This is a general point that I have in esports, and maybe I'll make a video about it one day. I actually sort of despise the word feel because of how it's used. Get rid of the word feel and start using the word think and say, we think that's the best way. And then when someone says, oh, why do you think that? You can explain, if you feel, it's like, well, I just felt that way. That's just the feeling I get. This is the sense I have. It's so vague. And who gives a fuck how someone feels? I care what they think, how they come to their conclusions, what the implications of that are, not what feeling they get about something, some vague, nebulous, emotional cloud that's tinged with different pigments of coloration at different points and just varies depending on the day. In general, and I'm not saying this just because there's a woman who made this original comment, but in general, I do feel like this whole topic of always saying feel actually comes from an over-feminization of modern culture in the West, which is the fact that players are always asked, how do you feel about this win? How they feel is usually not very interesting. They're young guys who aren't very articulate, aren't particularly in touch with their feelings. Their feelings are just going to be like, I feel good, I feel elated, I feel great. It's not even going to be very interesting. There's not going to be a lot of information there. It's such a nebulous set of terminology and phrases that they're going to use. Whereas if you ask them what they think, oh, well, I think that actually we did a great job in this area and I was expecting that it would go to it. You're getting all this interesting information. So I think it's an over-feminization that we're talking about how we feel rather than how we think. If you wanted to go super in depth, and maybe I will if I go into a video, I think this is sort of like a right hemisphere creative aspect of feelings and general sense in input versus the logical, modeling, pattern-seeking left hemisphere of the rational. I'm more interested in that in terms of these topics where we're discussing specific policy and then trying to reason through how it is done and how it can be done differently and to improve upon it. Not just looking for stuff that feels the best. Okay, so let's see. This was where someone was comparing. It's where Scoots had made a tweet where he compared this prize money won in 2006 in 1.6 to the prize money won in 2014 in CSGO. And the numbers were like similar or 2006 was even slightly higher. So a guy says, very true, but those numbers are only that high for Dota. He's talking about Dota having so much money, because of crowdfunding. Those numbers are only that high for Dota because of it being funded by the community. What I don't understand is why Valve wouldn't want the same thing for CSGO. It seems as easy as dedicating a percentage of the profits from some esports cases to the prize pool. We want it, the players definitely want it, why doesn't Valve want it? So that's a very reasonable post. There's a guy who replies to that, and he says, probably no time. With 168 events stretching across the year, taking up 2 to 3 days each, not including time, travel, etc., some overlapping with each other, it's obviously hard to see downtime for teams. Obviously, I'll skip this part actually. Where was the part I was going to go to here? On Valve's part, the international planning probably takes up a majority of their resources and time for most of the year. This is in combination with maintaining Steam, their other games, servers, banning people, adding new games. This year's production was actually pretty clean, ignoring the stream downtime. Putting time into an international for CSGO would take up a lot of these same resources, and I guess they've forgone it for the more popular game. Right? That's actually entirely inaccurate because, first of all, Valve has different teams of people working on CSGO and working on Dota. It's not like Valve is one company where everyone does everything and they down tools and then everyone just stops doing stuff for CSGO and Steam's just going crazy and they're just working on the international only. Those are totally separate teams of people. Secondly, Dota is making so many millions of dollars, they're entirely justified having more staff for Dota, getting more staff, putting lots of resources in there. But since CSGO's making millions and millions and millions themselves, and for each event, and would for an international event, would make millions, they'd be entirely justified hiring more people specifically just for CSGO, just for that side of Valve that had nothing to do with Dota. You wouldn't be taking the fucking Ice Frog and the Dota guys saying, hey, can you work on the CSGO thing now? It isn't the same resources whatsoever. It's the same as this. Okay, there's a great piece of ignorance that people have where people will say a really stupid thing, here's the thing, if you don't think it through, it has a logic to it, okay? So I remember there was a great example where Sarah Palin, when she was one of the candidates to be she was the vice presidential candidate, and she was saying something along the lines of like, why are we wasting our time doing scientific experiments on a fucking fruit, she didn't say fucking, on fruit flies when we could be working on, like cures for cancer or something. And that sounds logically like, yeah, why are we wasting time on fruit flies? Put all your effort into cancer. Well, the people who were doing the experiments on fruit flies, first of all, actually the fruit fly experiments found out certain genetic things which led to advances in science, because how science works. You do science, then the advancements come. You can't know in advance what you're working on, reverse engineer it. They led to advancements that actually were very beneficial in other cures and other areas of science in terms of technology as well. Secondly, the guys who work on the fruit fly shit aren't the sort of biologists who'd be working on the cancer, genetic biologists who work on the cancer thing. Totally different skill sets. They never would be taken off one and on the other. And it's not just a big pool of generic scientists who you go, right, guys, number one thing to work on, cure lung cancer. There you go. Hey, you over there, stop working on better flavor, Listerine, mouthwash. It already tastes all right. It's minty enough. You, get on cancer now. We need to get this cracked before the day's over. My dad's got cancer, for fuck's sake. I don't want him to have a minty, fresh breath while he's dying of cancer. Like, it's not like that, is it? It's ridiculous. So in the same sense, it's not like that at Valve. It's a very naive way of thinking it. Also, this idea that it takes away resources. You can do both. There's nothing stopping you. It's like, you guys think it's like fucking when McDonald's has that marketing campaign where they don't sell the McRib sandwich that often. They purposely sell it every now and then just as a limited edition item because they want people to go crazy, but the fact it's not there very often, buy a whole load of them now and be super hyped about it. Then it's going to go away and they're going to be like, oh, I hope it comes back soon. And then they can re-hype it. You do know that's not resources. Like, the reason why the McRib is not available all the time is not because they're spending too much of their time and effort working on the Big Mac and making Big Macs. They could make both in an equal amount and it wouldn't be a problem. And if both were super successful, they'd hire more staff, have more chains, and they'd still be making both. That's not an issue whatsoever. Okay, so let me see. Okay, so we're in the same thread about people comparing the prize money. People say, someone says, 2006 was the peak of competitive CS 1.6, and 2014 had several months where CSGO was just starting to get back on track. True. 2015 would be a much better comparison, except it wouldn't because 2015 isn't over. Therefore, to have the proper data scoots an entirely reasonable comparison. We are at 2.8 million in August, and this is easily 1.5 million in, and there is easily 1.5 in already announced tournaments for the rest of the year. But then someone replies, but the circle jerk, he even forgot the sticker money. And then he said that the sticker money was almost around the money for CS in 2006. Yes, but why the fuck would he include the sticker money? This is a comparison of prize money. Like, does the sticker money, if the sticker money makes the number as big or bigger, is it fine for there not to be more prize money in CSGO? You can have both. It's not one or the other. Also, stickers didn't exist back in 2006. What would be the point of comparing? And you don't have the figures on the sticker money. Even when we have the overall figures, we don't have by team. It's not broken up evenly like it used to be for all the legends, all the challenges. Now it's a fucking popularity contest. So as a result, the team who won all... Remember, prize money is money you win. That's what's good about it. So you win the first places, you get all this money. That's why it's great to have that as a metric to set for the overall competitive scene and to keep demanding high first places and overall prize purses. Popularity contests mean that Nip can finish 5th to 8th and get more sticker money than probably like Envious who finished top 4. Definitely probably more than Fnatic who won the fucking tournament. So that's not a good scenario when we're talking about the economics of the competitive scene and winning. That's just people getting more money from an external concept. So that shouldn't be included. Now then. Oh, here's a great one. So this was about Twitch needing a category for CSGO gambling. And this guy here, let me see. The problem is I don't remember what the original comments were, but here's what the guy said anyway, because I can respond to this. You must, and there we have it. You must still be in high school if you think that's at all a feasible way to live in today's world. Because I think it was about the gambling still. We're going buck wild with it. Here's an idea. Don't have a family if you can't be the man and provide for it. Forcing your woman to work while your kids get raised by strangers and indoctrinated by public schools is worse than not having kids at all. I mean, that's debatable. I'm glad you admit the system is broken, though, and needs to be torn down. Look at the rate of medication modern women are on. The extreme depression, the unhappiness. They weren't meant to be forced to work all day like wage slaves while sacrificing their fertile, healthy years just to punch a clock because a feminist told them it makes them free. Start setting up a society where they get married early to a man who can love them and that they can be a woman for. You'll see society start improving. I mean, that's entirely debatable, because now you're doing it how nature intended and how we flourished for thousands of years before we suddenly thought we were smarter than evolution. I mean, just the way that's characterized out there actually kills me, mate. First of all, nature intended. Like, nature never intended anything, mate. Nature has no teleology to it. There's no purpose driving nature. It essentially, at the highest level, there are elements of it that are random forces. And then environmental pressures is what's causing certain paths to be taken. Certain things die off, certain things thrive. Then the circumstances, here's the key thing, change, and other things thrive. And things that worked before no longer work. And maybe even things that seemed superior or more advanced die off and become less advanced. Or degrade into less, well, not less evolved, the actual evolution just means the change. But to you, become less impressive or whatever, because that's now the new pressures demand certain things otherwise. Well, I don't know what this thing is that's smarter than evolution. There's no intelligence to evolution whatsoever. That's why evolution can make things worse. Because the situation changes, so the gene pool is selecting from a different aspect, and things are less complicated, less interesting in certain aspects. There's also the aspect that when he's saying this whole thing about, well, just don't have kids, just don't get married then, just don't marry people like that. I mean, this is just, great idea, mate. Like, yeah, that's very reasonable. That's a way to think if you can control everyone's life on a perfect scenario. People are in their life making their choices, though. Think about it. So that's like going to a bunch of people, okay, who are black people who live in the ghetto and are really poor. Like, well, just stop living in the ghetto. Hey, people who are black people in the ghetto, stop having kids because then your kids will be poor black people in the ghetto. What fucking choice do they have? If they want to have kids and live in a life that they think's fulfilling with kids, that's the circumstances they're in. Starving people in Africa. Can't you see you're starving in Africa? Stop having kids. Stop fucking making other starving people. Again, what choice do they have, mate? They can't move somewhere else, can they? So basically, in his world, no one should breed or attempt to get jobs, etc., unless they're like in first world countries with extensive contingency plans for everything that could go wrong, a detailed roadmap of their future and every possible issue that could happen and solutions prepared. I mean, for a start off, even if you were in that situation, what if you lose your job tomorrow? What if your leg gets fucking chopped off and you can't do it? What if you get ill, some debilitating illness and you can't do your job and you're going to lose your job, lose your money, not be in a situation to do all these things, and you're going to be in the same problems. It's just a super naive way of looking at the world. It's a great example where people just think they know better than everyone. And also just fundamentally doesn't understand even the basics of evolution as far as we can tell, the processes and the principles. And then there was another comment in the same thread, just to bring my mood up, which just was a great comment. It just said, as a 16-year-old, I would much rather see tit than gambling. Now, listen, I'm right there with you, buddy. I think there's nothing wrong with gambling, but I love me some tits too. Like, I get a lot more enjoyment out of like looking through a Kate Upton image folder than I do from betting some skins. Get wrecked. Though, let me see. Okay, here's some comments after I posted that stat that Nip's only best of 3 win over a team who were ranked top 10 at the time was their win over Dignitas at G30 Summer Masters 1. And aside from that, in the last 3 months, they haven't beaten a single top 10 team in a best of 3, which obviously is a terrible start. So this guy says here, to try and explain away, these people are all Nip fans, by the way. Technically, since the beginning of June, they've only lost 4 best of 3s. 0-2 versus Virtus Pro at ESL 1 Cologne, quarterfinals. 0-2 against Fnatic at Face It Stage 1 finals. In the group, in DreamHack Valencia, basically. They went 1-2 against Flipside, featuring Hiko at ESWC 2015. 0-2 against Fnatic DreamHack Open Summer semi-final. And they lost to Envious 0-3 to best of 5 in Summer Masters 1 final. Although these results don't look too bad in isolation, really, mate, really, so it doesn't look too bad to lose 1-2 to Flipside, who aren't even a top 10 team, without one of their better players, World Edit, and with Hiko standing in, who doesn't even speak fucking Russian. That doesn't look like a bad result to you in isolation. Okay, let's keep going with that one. Jeez Louise. Then he's put, in isolation, they look especially poor, to me anyway, when you consider the only best of 3 wins they had in this time frame. Here's a good one. Are wins against Mouse Sports, which is before Mouse Sports really were considered really good. Dignitas, who, yeah, they're a top 10 team, but not considered elite. And Acer, who no one considers even vaguely top 10. They did, however, win 2 best of 3s against SK, win 3 best of 3s against SK, LGB, and Mouse Sports. Now, first of all, some of those results he's listed there, presumably the LGB one, is actually online, so I don't know who gives a fuck about that, mate. Anyway, SK, who gives a flying fuck, mate? That's not even the good SK. And that was when they first came along with that lineup, and they had 100, etc. That was terrible. And beating Mouse Sports, okay, that one's not bad, but they weren't ranked top 10. It was their first event where they started to make their rise there. And then he suggests that these results should help them retain some dignity. Like, not really, mate. And then the guy responds, classic Nip fan here. This is brilliant. It's pretty obvious that Nip is in a slump, but it'd be wrong to say that they're completely out of the game. Why is that? They just don't keep their form up and somewhat tend to tilt. You mean tilt in like every single best of 3 series against a top 10 ranked team. See, if you tilt every now and then, that could be indicative of the fact that there's some issues and stress on the team, etc. If you tilt all the time, you might not be tilting it, you might just be worse, which conclusively we can prove they are actually, by all means of evidence and rational speculation and consideration and analysis. A swap of the IGL might help, but I doubt it's just his fault. No reason given as to why, by the way. They didn't make it to the final of this major, but I'd say they still showed an overall improvement in their performance this major compared to the last months. Now, why is that? Did you not see where they went super close with fucking CLG or something, got ultra trashed by TSM, who in the past, even when TSM had risen to God mode, Nip played TSM very well when they were in the final of that Face It. They smashed them on Inferno, they played them close on the other maps. This was way worse performance now, and to be that close to CLG is terrible, and in general, their good performances on maps against top teams is them coming close and always losing. So they're not even getting close to good wins, basically. And then he says, I just really dislike these bashing tweets and statements. Now, what's great is, it wasn't even bashing. I didn't make any judgment. I just gave a fucking fact. That just shows how unreal fans are. Here's how you know a fan. Because they themselves aren't basing their own opinions on facts and rational judgment. It's all emotional. They actually will get mad at you and make it that you're making judgments emotionally when you just use facts and actual literal numbers. They can get angry at numbers. Like you could say, oh, this team is 1-3 in their last series, and they'd be like, all right, asshole, why do you have to say that? It's just a fact, mate. Like, you must know that it's bad. That's why you're getting annoyed at it, right? Anyway, keep going. We're almost at the end now. I don't know if I'll do all these. This has been fucking super long anyway. Let me see. Oh, it's a beautiful one. So this is about the Nip magic, okay? 7 points. Probably more now. How can a team that dominated CSGO for 2 years and won a major be drastically overrated? Because someone had said that Fnatic... someone had said that Nip is overrated. Of course the fans think highly of them when they were at the pinnacle of CSGO longer than Fnatic is now. Agreed. They aren't in a good spot now, but to think fans are stupid for expecting more of them is ironically a stupid thing to say. No, it's not. That's not irony, actually, mate. The irony is when the reality of a situation is different from the expectation. Just maybe you mean it's funny that they think that. Learn what irony is. So when you look at this situation, okay, this is a perfect comment for sort of a Nip fan here. So they dominated CSGO for 2 years, won a major, And therefore, how can they be drastically overrated? Because no one's rating them on that basis. They're rating them now and in the last 6 to 9 months when they don't have a major to their name. Do you understand that? So if they're rated based on what happened before at that level, but for now, when they haven't done any of that now, that's exactly why you know they are. Built into your comment is why they are overrated. Because they were at the pinnacle back then, so it wasn't overrating if you said they were that good then. But now they're not at the pinnacle, therefore to say they're even close to that is unrealistic. Thank you. I've helped you get to this point, haven't I? Problem solved. So you're using shit from years ago to explain away overrating them now and delusional thinking now. That doesn't work, mate. It's wrong, which is what's so perfect, because they didn't dominate for these 2 years. They actually, by the way, also didn't dominate for 2 years. That's actually a flaw. They were close to the top for 2 years. First year, super sick and dominant. Second year, they only won 4 titles overall of the second year. Now, yes, that's still up there with some of the best teams. That's not the most, by the way. That's not the most dominant. And that's all. Actually, that might be over that period the most overall. Let me think. If we go for a year from the colonial period, that might be the most overall. It's not super dominant, especially not compared to their first year or Fnatic's year since. Then you have to add in other factors that they were only the best team overall that whole span of the second year due to the ranking system. As in, Titan was better than them at periods in time, but fell off. VP had tournaments where they were better than them, didn't win enough titles. Na'Vi was good, but very erratic. So it wasn't dominance that kept them on top the second year, it was consistency, which is very different. And also, expecting something and saying it'll happen are very different things. It's fine for NIP fans to say, that you were a great team. I expect the NIP organization to build great teams again. I expect them to be able to get back to greatness. That's fine. That's reasonable. I expect that. Not as in I think it'll happen, but I think that's an expectation that's reasonable to put on this team. Now, to say it will happen, that's when it's delusional. That's when it's overrating. Let's make that very clear. Don't ever, to try and dismiss people's argument, just conflate all arguments into one very simplistic argument and removing all nuance and context. I hope I've made that point throughout this fucking video. Let me see. Okay, this last thing I'll address is when, in one of my top 10 threads, people got... there's a certain type of comment, which is one that's very popular. This one had 48 points. It says, logically then, the list is completely useless. It doesn't indicate current form, nor a true ranking system based off a team's skill. That's why power rankings are more accurate, in my opinion. If a disappointing major doesn't move you up a spot, and a successful major doesn't move you down a spot, rather, and a successful major doesn't move you up a spot at all, this list kind of seems pointless to me. Now, I can address some concerns here about the concepts of lists for you. So, current form. By his logic, current form literally means form right now. No, current form means recent form. So, last 2 to 3 tournaments. In my case, I do last 2 to 3 months, because then you can have one bad tournament over the span of, say, a month, and then if your last 2 are good and your next one's good, the overall line through it is still high. You're not just suddenly shit, and then you're not suddenly really great, super shit next tournament, super great the next one. That's unrealistic. The average makes more sense there. So current form by this person's logic, as far as I can tell, just means the last tournament. So wherever you place in the last tournament, that's your current form. He's basically abused the word form and the word current to mean that right now, this is only, current form means right this second. Well, in that case, there's no need for rankings, is there? By his logic, the top 10 rankings every single tournament is just the placings of the tournament. So there's no analysis needed. Just go and look at the placings of the major. That's current form for him. Current skill, how the fuck would rankings tell you about skill? Even skill as a team. It's not about that. It's about placings. It's about who you placed, who you met where, who you beat where. The placing doesn't tell you skill in terms of who would beat who. It doesn't tell you that number 2 would beat number 5. Not necessarily. What's the matchup there? So in this particular case, I think in my rankings, number 5 is what, VP, and number 2 is Na'Vi. Well, VP has a great matchup against Na'Vi at the moment. But you know why VP is number 5? Because VP wouldn't beat Fnatic. Because VP probably wouldn't beat Envious. VP might not beat TSM. Whereas VP would beat Na'Vi, whereas Na'Vi might be able to beat some of those teams. Might be able to beat TSM. Might be able to beat these other ones. That's the way it works. That's the way overall it works. It's against the field, not skill, and not against certain matchups, which is another aspect. Now, the idea that a major, by his system, if you have a good major, you should move up a spot. If you lose one, if you have a bad one, you should move down one. Well, that doesn't make any sense, does it? Because what happens when teams have a good major, but it's appropriate to how good they were anyway, which is similar to this major, therefore, they sort of do move up because they gain the points, but relative to everyone else, they move up and everyone else moves up, and then everyone else is bad moves up to a similar level. Then you don't move at all. Likewise, if you did poorly, why would that make you change in that sense? So shouldn't automatically drop you off. Like the idea that Na'Vi didn't make the semi, so they should instantly not be able to be a top 3 team. That's ridiculous. Look what they accomplished in the last 3 months and in all the tournaments beforehand. So then another comment. Likewise, in Thorin's rankings, it's arguable if it makes sense to consider 3 months. In the same manner, it's arguable how matchups should be considered and how the future potential of a team has to be taken into consideration. How the fuck can you take future potential, into consideration in rankings of a team now where they are ranked? How the fuck can you look into the future? How can you even speculate in the future on where they should be ranked? Oh, well, I think Envious could win some tournaments, therefore I'll just put them top 2 already. But they didn't do it. The teams who did it now get to be top 2. That's why they're top 2. It's not about the future. Here's the key thing to understand about the rankings. They don't tell you about the future. They don't even tell you about the next event, which is the future. They tell you about now and the past. Right now, that team's ranked here. And in the past, this is what they accomplished to be ranked here now. That's the concept of the rankings. Then there's another comment. I might be wrong, but maybe Thorin is looking too much at the results and such, not how they're actually playing, which would explain my opinion of Virtus Pro definitely not being number 4. So if I'm not looking at the results, what the fuck should I look at? The ranking is based on results. Now there's the context of results, but the results are still the primary thing doing the ranking, and in every ranking I'm aware of. It's not a list called Thorin's favourite teams or Thorin's teams that he likes this week. It's based on rankings, how they stack up and where they should be relative to each other in the world. Now, the idea that you should look at how they're playing, well, I do in a sense, in as much as I judge who you beat and etc. But playing super awesome in a match you lose doesn't get you points, doesn't build you up the rankings. Someone else who plays someone lesser but gets 4 rounds ahead of you, as in phases, and goes all the way to the final, you get an awesome match in the quarterfinal, doesn't mean that, oh, well, you played better, so you get to be ahead of them for the tournament. That would be ridiculous. Again, that would be way too subjective. I have it subjective in as much as any system has to be subjective because you have to design the criteria. So I'm just describing the criteria, and I put my name on it so there's less argument about it. But in general, my system is, to some degrees, as subjective as any ranking system. They just design the criteria subjectively themselves, then make the computer run and do it themselves. So that's subjective in itself. Anyway, that's the end of this one. The first CSGO, Thorin versus Reddit. I'll be back in the future for other ones, but I will alternate through games. And if I can, I'll try and do them more often. But we'll see. I have to build up a good backlog of them. So thanks to Overdraft for all the money and letting me wreck fools.